Sisters Leah and Margaret Fox publicly declared that they had contacted spirits from beyond the grave. An American fascination for communicating with the dead occurred almost overnight. The Fox sisters used a technique called a seance, which quickly became one of America's most popular pastimes. People gathered in a darkened room while a medium tried to make contact with the spirit world.
There would be tambourines and other bells that would sound, and the medium would actually be able to exude, ectoplasm from their nostrils or their mouth, and it was this sort of spiritual substance that allowed the spirits of the dead to manifest and appear. And in other cases, the medium would simply become a conduit or a channel through which the deceased were able to speak.
Many who practiced spiritualism believed it would lead to scientific proof of the existence and immortality of the soul, and they gained an iconic champion when the Russian-born Madame Blavatsky arrived in New York at the height of spiritualism's popularity. She soon became the self-proclaimed decoder of ancient occult secrets.
She grew up in a wonderful occult library that her father had established. She could see the connections between different cultures, spiritual teachings, and she was attempting to correct the errors of Christianity by bringing in mysticism and spirituality from other cultures.
Born in the Ukraine in 1831 to a lower-ranking nobleman, Blavatsky was married early, but she abandoned her husband to spend 10 years traveling the world. She claimed to have studied with mystical adepts in India and Tibet. The exotic cigar-smoking medium became a sensation in the occult circles.
She just wouldn't accept limits. She was one of the most educated person anybody who met her had ever met. And they couldn't understand, how could this powerful intellect be in this female body, just chewing up the landscape and producing this tremendous inspiration?
Blavatsky's seances were the talk of New York. Mysterious letters would appear, written by spiritual leaders she called the Great White Brotherhood.
Blavatsky was not above taking advantage of the popularity of seances to push her own cause, and she used these seances to very spectacular effect to materialize letters written by these ascended masters as instructions being passed down to her.
The Brotherhood dictated to her the books that became the foundation of a new science of mysticism, Theosophy.
Blavatsky wrote essentially two gigantic collections, Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine, which purported to be the teachings, the secret teachings of this kind of Eastern Brotherhood, the mystery schools of initiation. And she totally altered the spiritual landscape of Western civilization by introducing those concepts.
She was very much a pioneer in bringing ideas of Eastern esotericism into the West. She focused on the similarities between Christianity and Hinduism and Buddhism and other spiritual traditions, arguing that there is in fact a tradition that underlies all spiritual faiths in the world.
Blavatsky regarded her work as spiritual science and made connections between recent scientific advancements and occult beliefs. Blavatsky promoted the ancient Eastern mystical view that the essential nature of the world was not matter, but energy, which foreshadowed the discoveries of modern physics. Blavatsky also revived the Eastern beliefs in reincarnation and karma. Quickly acquiring a cult following, she launched the Theosophy Society.
The term Theosophy, which Blavatsky coined, really comes from two words. They're of Greek origin. One is theos, which means God, and Sophia, which means wisdom. So the Theosophical Society was teaching divine or sacred wisdom.
The Theosophical Society spread internationally and still exists in many countries. Blavatsky was hailed by her followers as the mother of the New Age. But for all of Blavatsky's charisma, she soon fell victim to her own success.
And at the time that she was becoming famous, this business of spiritualism and channeling, and especially seances where you'd call up your dead ancestors. That was going all over the Western world, and she felt like that was charlatanism. So she wanted to represent a model that stepped outside of that and spoke to the verities, the truths, the larger things. But unfortunately, in the end, she got reduced down to the very thing she was trying to fight.
In 1885, Blavatsky was investigated by London's Society for Psychical Research. It concluded that her seances were rigged. Writings didn't magically come from beyond the grave.
There was a spring-loaded device in the bedroom above her chamber that allowed someone to put a letter into this device and have it drop down between the floorboards and materialize in their hands.
Though many devoted followers refused to abandon Theosophy, Blavatsky was now tainted with fraud. She died soon afterwards. Her followers established a new headquarters in India where Theosophy thrived. A young protege, Krishnamurti, was identified as a reincarnated master and groomed to lead the Theosophy Society into the 20th century. Blavatsky's synthesis of Eastern and Western spirituality broke new ground in occultism. A man described by newspapers as the most wickedest man alive claimed he had penetrated even deeper into mysteries. Born in 1875, Aleister Crowley was raised in a strict religious household. His mother nicknamed him the Beast from the Book of Revelation. It was a title he embraced his entire life.
He identified himself as the antichrist, as the force that would take away this terrible Christian program which had so warped his childhood.
Crowley began studying the occult as a member of the Golden Dawn.
The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was the secret society par excellence of the Victorian age in England. It brought together, again, the knowledge that was available at that point in time. So you had tarot, and you had Kabbalah, and you had John Dee's angelic magic and Rosicrucian traditions all being melded together under a single system.
The Golden Dawn attracted many of the London intelligentsia. Crowley, though, ultimately broke away from the group. He would find his own system of belief after a trip to Egypt, where his wife received a mystical signal that told him to prepare himself for a message from the gods. Heeding the call, he began spontaneously writing a book he called the Book of the Law.
This book announces a new law for mankind. And in fact, it tells us that we are very emboldened and brightened spiritual entity, that in fact, we are as the gods.
The Book of the Law was another synthesis of Eastern and Western spirituality. Crowley called his new system the Liman. It incorporated principles of magic that he said he had learned from ancient Egyptian and other occult sources. He became a self-proclaimed master of action at a distance, focusing the power of his intention or will to create desired effects.
Aleister Crowley defined magic as the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with the will. And his whole approach is basically to empower the practitioner to make their intentions happen, to materialize what they want to have happen in the world.
Thalima's fundamental law was, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will." While this may have meant pursuing a higher path for some, for others, it excused every variety of deviant behavior. Some critics claim that Crowley himself was one of its worst offenders.
Crowley was practicing sexuality as a spiritual path. He reduced a great deal of symbolic teachings to their essence, which is essentially the duality or the polarity between male and female. And he experimented greatly within that sphere to understand what mysteries were contained within the sexual act.
Crowley went on to start his own secret society, the Ordo Templi Orientis, and wrote numerous books about meditation and ceremonial magic. He also helped reinterpret tarot for the 20th century.
The tarot is a pictorial representation of occult teachings. It's a method of going within and contacting archetypal levels within oneself, spiritual levels, and entering meditative state in which intuition is heightened, and maybe even, where you can see certain patterns developing because you're in the right state of mind.
While popularized by Italian noblemen in the 1300s as playing cards, some say tarot's origins date to ancient Egypt. Over time, they acquired occult significance. Crowley developed a deck of his own called the Book of Thoth, based on the Egyptian magic he had studied. A popular divination tool today, tarot is said to reveal information about the seeker and the questions about his future.
Everything that's related in one moment of time is all connected. So if two people come together around a question and they're manipulating an oracular tool like this, but if that manipulation is intended to serve the need and the feeling, then it will make a mirroring reflection of the energy that's produced between the two people.
Crowley's writings, like Madame Blavatsky's, were heralded as forerunners of many New Age ideas. But despite his serious work in occultism, ultimately he became infamous for his use of drugs and decadent sexual behavior. As Hitler rose to power in the 1930s, Crowley's reputation was fatally damaged. He wrote pro-Nazi propaganda and was soon an outcast. After World War II, it was rumored that Hitler had used Crowley's and Madame Blavatsky's writings to help him create his theory of a master race.
I don't think there's any evidence that Hitler read the works of Aleister Crowley per se. It's definitely known that Hitler and members of his regime had a very keen interest in the occult, and they adopted the trappings of occult symbolism.
Ill and addicted to opium, Crowley spent his final days in a boarding house and died in 1947. Like other occultists before him, Crowley attempted to learn the secrets of the gods, only to be discredited and condemned by society. Occult practices languished on the fringes of society for most of the 20th century, but they resurfaced during the hippie movement of the 60s. Popular gurus like the Maharishi and Timothy Leary promoted altered states of consciousness that could lead to higher levels of self-awareness. Individualism became the goal of millions of young people who rejected traditional religion to find their own direct route to God. By the 1980s, New Age ideas had become mainstream. Madame Blavatsky's writings became pivotal in reinterpreting occultism for modern audiences, and even Aleister Crowley's reputation was somewhat restored.
There was this boom in occult interest that resulted in Crowley being almost a pop culture icon. The Beatles put Aleister Crowley on the cover of Sgt. Pepper. You have musicians like David Bowie and Jimmy Page becoming very interested in Crowley. He experienced a renaissance, as it were, in the 60s and 70s, and has been a very popular figure ever since.
Occult belief systems are now embraced by millions of New Age followers who pick and choose from their wide array of concepts to fashion their own individual brand of spirituality. Yet the occult is still often regarded with suspicion. Many of those who practice occultism describe it as a modern mystical quest.
The mystical quest is the process by which a limited, time-space-bound human being can transcend their background and history and come into this divinized or macrocosmic consciousness. And that is the process of becoming immortal. Leaving this physical flesh behind and being successively identified with larger and larger realms of reality.
The holistic philosophy of New Age beliefs continues to grow in popularity.
We're surrounded by material wealth and technology, and we feel like we've lost something.